Good morning, everybody. Fergus Dolan here from NALA. We're delighted to have you here this morning for our fourth webinar in the Numeracy Webinar Maths Week series. This morning's webinar is Numeracy in the Media, Identifying Maths Tasks in the News and Media. And we're delighted to welcome Cathy O'Sullivan from the University of Galway. Hi, Cathy.
Hi, Fergus.
Cathy will be facilitating this morning, and we've a small number. We've 10 at the moment. We're due to have 28, but I don't think we'll have that. So please feel free to unmute or to ask Cathy questions or to type your questions into the chat box. Cathy has a task for you later, and she really wants you all to unmute and engage, okay? No hiding, no looking at the window, no drinking coffee. She wants you to engage, and we're watching you. Okay, Cathy, over to you and all the best.
We're going to go right into teacher mode there, Fergus. Thank you for having me today. I'm delighted to share some numeracy learning in the media and how to identify maths tasks in the news and in the media. So I suppose firstly, just a bit of background about myself. I'm a qualified maths teacher, and I have an interest in practical ways of supporting students who are learning mathematics and helping students develop their numeracy skills so that they can engage in society in a meaningful way. So I suppose my PhD background investigated how teachers at secondary school can teach numeracy across all subject areas so that it's not just up to the mathematics teacher. I'm a maths education lecturer in the University of Galway. I should have changed that. I forget that it's changed to the University of Galway instead of NUIG. And as I said, I'm just passionate about supporting all citizens to become numerate citizens. So why bother? I suppose the main reason here is that one of the main reasons is that the global goals the UN have stated by 2030, very ambitious goal, is that all our youth will have literacy and numeracy skills that they are able to engage in the world. And at present here in Ireland, we have a focus on supporting numeracy learning across the school curriculum in both early education sector and primary and further education sector. So why do we need numeracy skills? So poor numeracy skills may lead to bad building like this. And I suppose what I want to highlight today is for your students and your adult learners to learn why numeracy is important in the real world. I don't know about you, but I'd rather not be sitting in a toilet here. And I do love a good bargain, so it's important to highlight why it's important that we have the necessary numeracy skills even when we're doing our shopping. So moving on to, so the way I look at numeracy, first of all, and plan for numeracy learning in the classroom is getting kind of looking through the lens of this model for numeracy in the 21st century. And I'm not sure if you've seen any of this before, but some Australian researchers developed this model for numeracy and how they can look for numeracy opportunities within any subject area by using this model. So first of all, it's where you use numeracy in what contexts. So looking at your personal and social lives, in your work life, and then I suppose to be an engaged citizen and understand maybe what is presented to us in the media, which is what I'm focusing on today. You obviously need some mathematical skills, being able to problem solve and use the necessary mathematical knowledge that you require in order to be numerate. And then you need to be confident. So dispositions are very important. A willingness to learn, having confidence, and taking risks. And finally, what tools do you use? So today we will look at some representational tools, maybe data that has been presented in the media to us, and navigating how I actually understand what is being presented to me. So finally, then the critical orientation is, I suppose, the most important part, where you bring this all together and you have that critical analytical tool that you can make judgments and decisions in life, which is very important, based on what is being presented to us in the media. So here we have a continuum of contemporary meanings for numeracy. So it looks at maybe fostering numeracy as a technical skill, and using those basic mathematical knowledge and skills that you learn in school or in further education courses, and then applying them to real life and seeing where you actually learn that in, or where you use that, should I say, in your social life. So the first one there is procedural interpretation of numeracy, that emphasizes the teaching of it, which is what you will be doing. The second part then is looking at the functional perspective and focusing on the benefits of numeracy for their personal, social, and economic well-being. The third interpretation then is the technical skill or the social practice, and it's your contribution of numeracy to fostering kind of this intelligent citizenship in a range of different contexts that I spoke about earlier, be it work, be it your social life, or your personal life. And then finally, the critical perspective, by recognizing how people's perceptions of an issue are shaped maybe by their misinterpretations or misunderstanding. And all of this may be down to what has been presented to us in the media. So just to talk very quickly about the value of statistics. So I don't know, have you ever heard the phrase that is it 90% of statistics are false? So like looking at statistics and taking into consideration the context that those statistics are actually presented in. So good statistics obviously are at the foundation of all sound decision making across society and the economy. Our policies, our strategies all depend on statistics. Our health policies are influenced by statistics. And finally, at a more personal end of the scale, statistics are also produced about the most even common names given to babies in a particular year. So you can decide whether to give your baby that name or not. So I suppose I'm going to move now to looking at some examples of statistics in the media. And here we have COVID times and like what was presented during COVID times to us. So for example, the media outlets regularly reported that the number of fully vaccinated cases admitted to hospital in intensive care units equaled or exceeded the number of unvaccinated cases. Which led people to believe that vaccines were ineffective as such. However, the figures needed to be interpreted in the context of the vaccination status of all people who tested positive. So here we have a table that presents typical data from a 6-week period in Australian health jurisdiction. So this is taken from Australia, but the same kind of statistics were being portrayed here in Ireland as well. So to investigate the question of vaccine effectiveness, students might begin by comparing the number of vaccinated and unvaccinated people in the ICU. So we see here that there's 250 versus 50. And then you might conclude incorrectly that you are 5 times more likely to be admitted if you're unvaccinated. However, the key issue here is looking at the number of unvaccinated people are overrepresented in ICU, and fully vaccinated are underrepresented. So in this example, if you were to actually look at the unvaccinated and vaccinated, you're 14 times more likely to be admitted to ICU if you were unvaccinated, other than so it's not 5 as what was portrayed in some media articles. Here is another example of looking at a graph. Now, this was from the United States. First of all, it's very difficult to read the graph, and what I suppose the questions that you would be asking or getting your students to think about is, what is this graph actually telling us? So I'm assuming that the dates on the bottom here, so the 17th of the 6th and the 18th of the 6th, I assume they're the dates. Now, the numbers and the representation of the bar charts are not proportional at all. And then we obviously have no y-axis. But what it's maybe trying to do is misinterpret or mislead some of the data that is been presented. And not only was this happening in the US or in Australia, unfortunately, it was also happening here in Ireland. So here is a graph from RTE, and I'm actually just going to stop sharing there now, or maybe I just want you to think about these 4 questions, okay? I was going to put you into breakout rooms, but I think we're just going to do it as a group together. So if you could just take note of these 4 questions, and then I am going to stop sharing and I'll play a video where we have someone who describes what's going on in the graph. So what's the graph telling us? Does it make sense? Could you fix the graph, and what needs to change? Now, if I can, there we go. So I'm going to share my screen now, which you can see that, can you?
Yes.
Okay, great. So, and they're just going to talk about that graph, and I want you to think about those 4 different, or those 4 questions that I put up there.
I'll talk today about the 14-day incidence. You've been looking at the numbers.
Yes, and of course, this is where the acting chief medical officer raised concerns about some counties. And in saying it, he isn't saying that inevitably by raising concerns there's going to be lockdowns in these areas, but you can see their concern here where nowhere is safe. Take, for instance, the issue of Cork. And this graph here will just show you what's gone on in Cork in recent weeks. Cork's rate of 66 per 100,000 in a 14-day incidence is below the national average. So why worry about it? The worry is how sharply the red line is going up 103% in the past week alone. Big issue there about concerns about pubs and restaurants, 70 cases associated with that kind of thing there in Cork. Look at Galway as the second one, another one they're concerned about. 62 is the rate there per 100,000, below the national average. But the concern isn't below the national average, is that it's gone up 94% in the past week alone. And again, the issue there was house parties, young people and so on. Take, for instance, this one is a surprise on the border further Monaghan. And you can see in Monaghan, you say, my gosh, where does that come from? Up to 116 per 100,000, well above the national average. It's gone up like a rocket in very, very short time, 108% increase in the past week. And the other one they highlighted there was Roscommon. And you'd wonder why Roscommon. 84 is per 100,000, that's the national average. But you see the pace of the increase there, up 123% in the past week. So the concern is how quick this situation can change anywhere. They spoke about one particular case today where one infected individual led through one thing and another through various.
Okay, so I'm going to go back to sharing my PowerPoint now. It's the
Yeah, that's up, Kathy.
Yeah, so they're the 4 questions there. So I suppose my plan here was to kind of get you thinking about how you could use something like this in your classrooms, some real life data, and see how terrible it could be, or it could lead to serious misconceptions. So do you want me to go back to the graph here? So this is one of the graphs that was spoken about on RT News. So I'm just looking for any
Hi, it's Imelda here. I'm sorry, that all just moved way too fast for me. We had a quick glimpse of the graph, then we were on to the questions. I didn't get time to take them down, and then we were on to the TV clip. So I'm sorry, that was too fast for me.
Okay, sorry. So you can see the graph here now, and what I might just show again is the questions to consider. So what's the graph telling us? Does it make sense? And can you fix it? Or what needs to change? So in terms of the graph, like even just looking at the
I'm sorry. Can I have those questions again? I am actually trying to write them down.
Sorry, maybe I should just leave the questions here.
That would be great if you could leave them up, please.
Perfect. So if you think about the graph, I should probably have them side by side. Maybe can I get the let me get a picture of the graph. And it will be more helpful then. Now is that better? Yeah, great. So I suppose what I wanted you to think about is what's the graph telling us, how we can look at numeracy in real life, looking at even the x-axis and the y-axis. You can see the y-axis goes from 0 to 30, and then it jumps from 30 to 90, which is actually 60. And then it goes from 90 to 120, which is, but it looks the same. Then our spike, I suppose, in the graph says it's 116, which is actually over the top point of the graph, which is 120. And then on the x-axis, we have the 1st of June to the 28th of September, which there's no scaling there. So I suppose getting your adult learners to recognize that sometimes what's portrayed in the media, you know, you really have to analyze and critically look at what these numbers mean. So even the number of 116, what did that mean? Did it mean 116 people? Did it mean per 100,000? You know, what does the 108% mean? Now, I know the news broadcaster spoke about it and was really passionate about, you know, how informative a graph like this can be. And I suppose one task for your students could be kind of, does it make sense? What questions would they ask? And would they be able to fix the graph? So that's that was one example of where you could use news and graphs from the media to discuss in your class. Another example is our high-stake exams here in Ireland, reports in the media looking at results of our state examinations. So depending on what media resource or media source who are reporting the figures, so you have to think about what is their agenda. How can we critically analyze what is being presented to us in the newspapers? And what conclusions are we drawing then from it? So here we have some examples. Nearly 25% of Leaving Cert rechecks result in upgrades. So just over 6,100 candidates appealed, almost 11,650 results. So of them, then 24% were upgraded. What does this mean? Getting students or people to look at statistics that are being presented. The second one here, where it says at a glance, students in the Republic of Ireland got their results. The grades this year have been boosted by nearly 8%. So that was from an English newspaper. So they're saying that basically in the last 3 years, the results are being boosted. And why is that the case, or what kind of impact does it have on us? What conclusions are we drawing? I'm showing another example here of A-level results in the media, and this was in the media on social media in England. So even looking at what is presented here and the numbers, again, they're not making sense. So we have A-level results in 2017, the number is 2,718. So this is the average number of A-level qualifications. And then in 2018, the bar chart looks bigger, but the number then that's supposed to represent that bar chart is actually the smallest of them all. So what does that number mean? 2664. And then the smallest bar chart, 3007, which was 2019, has actually the biggest number. So again, what do they want us to see here? What has been misled? Another example, I'm not sure if any of you have watched Dopesick, which was a series on, I think it's on Disney Plus, or maybe it's on Netflix. But Annie,
I found this
Oh,
on
so-
the website.
and-
Disney Plus.
oh, sorry.
Check it out.
So the show is about the opioid crisis in the US, and it looks at a family and then a big pharma company, and the pharma's role in convincing, so like the big pharmaceutical company, in convincing doctors that OxyContin is not addictive. So basically, to prove their point, the big company shared this graph showing that the time release capsules don't actually cause any mood spikes, and it doesn't have an effect on people at all, and that there's fewer peaks. But as you can see here again on the y-axis, you can see that it's dramatically compressed. I don't know, can you see here? So the scale, basically the y-axis on the chart, we see that 30 looks like the midpoint here, but they've actually compressed all the numbers above 30. So instead of using a linear scale, they homogenized it to smoothen it out and make it look like a logarithmic scale. So again, we really have to think about what is being shared, what we're leading our students, our citizens to believe when they're presented with data and graphs like this. Here's another example about, so I suppose, what questions could you ask to help your student to take that critical stance on information, again, that's presented in a graph. So here we have an example of chocolate consumption is on the x-axis, and Nobel Prize per 10 million population is on the y-axis. So it comes from an article published in New England, a prestigious New England Journal of Medicine. So basically the author knew what they were doing by saying, wondered if chocolate consumption could also improve the cognitive function of entire populations. So he investigated the relationship between a country's chocolate consumption and the number of Nobel Prizes awarded to its citizens. So the graph shows that there is a strong statistically significant correlation between chocolate consumption per capita and the number of Nobel laureates per 10 million people. So we might note that Sweden is an outlier. So over here. And it basically, it has the Nobel, it has the awards, but it doesn't have the chocolate consumption. Whereas you can see here that, that Switzerland may look like, the more chocolate that you consume, that the more Nobel Prizes your country may get. Of course, there was like a lot of tongue in cheek in this article, and it was intended to highlight the dangers of confusing correlation with causality. So basically, just because there is a strong correlation doesn't necessarily mean that this is the cause. So I suppose in another example that we see an awful lot in the media at the moment is our housing crisis. And we see articles like the average price of a 3-bed semi in Ireland breaches 300,000. So this was actually an article in the paper only recently, I think it was during the summer. So it was for the first time since 2007. So 300,000, the average price. Now, I'm, as you know, in Galway, where 300,000 isn't the average price. I'm sure a lot of you in Dublin would know that 300,000 probably isn't the average price. So what does the average price mean? Here's another example of the papers. So Irish houses rise by 8.9% in the first 3 months of 2023. So again, what does that mean? What is the steep rise? Is it that it has risen or climbed since the end of 2022? Is it overall looking at the whole country? Do they look at the mean? Do they look at the median? So I suppose the most common measures of central tendency are the mean, median, and the mode. And the measure of tendency is commonly known as the average. So what I would be asking you to think about is explaining whether you use the mean or whether you use the median or the mode, and why you use the different, why we have different measures of central tendency. Now, what I wanted to look at next is something related to this. So here is how you could use real data in your classroom to get your students and adult learners thinking about what the mean actually means, what the median actually means. So there's a house hunting task. Katie wants to buy a house and would like to buy in Oranmore in Galway. So she booked an appointment with the local auctioneer to discuss her options. And I'm going to stop sharing now again because I want to show you I'm going to show you how to use this as a, let's say, a task or a worksheet. Enable and I was going to try and send this to you, but I think it's probably just easier if I share my screen. And what I might do is just even send it to Fergus afterwards, just so that you have a copy of this sort of a task.
Kathy, could you enlarge that a little bit so people can read it easier, please, if possible?
So
yeah, thanks.
Is that a bit better? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so here you have an example of 8 houses, prices of 8 houses in an area in Galway. So first of all, the question could be, which of the 3 measures could you consider most appropriate? So finding the mean, the median, and the mode. So the mean, when you take all the numbers and you add them up and you divide them by the number of numbers. The median then is your middle value. So it's especially important when you have an outlier in the data, like the one here, which is nearly 600,000, is the outlier. And if you were to use the mean, the answer would be different to what your median value would be. So your median then is ranging the numbers from the lowest to the highest and picking the middle value. And then the mode is the most common. So even having a look there at those 3 questions, I'll give you a couple of minutes to think about them more. Oh, sorry. So I suppose one of the things that I wanted to show today is in one of the articles there that I had a headline from. They did present, you know, the average county by county, and you could even get your students to investigate is what type of average that they used. Was it the median or was it the mean? Another example of the median and the mean is looking at the median age of, it's probably a bit grim now, but the median age of death in Ireland. And the reason that they look at the median is so that our data isn't skewed by, let's say, the outliers of younger people dying, and that you're not taking that the average age is maybe 50, you know. So that's why it's important to use the median. So is this something that you would use in your classes, or?
Imelda here. Sorry, I just feel I need to explain my silence. My students are travellers living on halting sites, so this isn't something I would use. I can absolutely see the benefit of using it in certain groups, but just not with mine.
Okay, of course. But so you could even adapt it from obviously the housing crisis to something that maybe your travellers would be that they will be interested in when you are teaching the mean and the median and the mode.
Yeah, of course.
So
and just a comment as well. I mean, I can absolutely see why you would have picked COVID and the Leaving Cert, but again, I would avoid those like the plague in my group.
okay.
I think COVID was controversial enough without. I suppose what I feel would happen would be it would become a conversation about all the vaccinations, anti-vaccinations. It would absolutely stop being about numbers and it would become about something else.
Okay.
Equally, I think the Leaving Cert is something my students wouldn't be doing, but I get why you've chosen them, but
Yeah.
for my personal situation, they wouldn't be things I'd be looking at.
Okay.
I think some of the bar charts that you've shown, certainly though, it's almost as if the graphic designer from the newspaper or the magazine said, oh, let's just make this colourful, but it stopped being mathematical, and that's certainly something to be discussed, possibly more in communication than maths in some way.
Yeah, definitely. And I see it an awful lot actually with pie charts.
Yes.
So pie charts are often used because they're lovely and colourful, and you know it's a circle and it's different to the bar chart. But the information portrayed in those pie charts, then you can barely see some of the data because they're only slivers of, you know, the sectors are so small. But yeah, that's all great, Melda. Thank you.
Hello, Kathy. This is Tony Sweeney.
Hi, Tony. How are you?
Looking at the figures there, I wouldn't start off with using a real life example. I would start off with maybe small figures so that all the terminology would become clear to the students. You might start off with just, you know, single digit or figures like, and then you would show the difference between the mean, the median, and the mode.
Yeah.
So that, and they would be able to apply it to the real life figures then when they come across them.
Yeah. So I suppose the one example there could be like ages in, you know, if you're looking at a primary school classroom and the age of, so I suppose where I'm coming from is that a lot of people don't realize the impact of the maths that they learn in school if it's not in context. So that's why I was trying to put it in context here of what we're learning or seeing in the media, you know.
I would support it also by using like bar charts, some kind of pictorial.
Yes, for the visual learners.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks, Tony. That's great. So what I might go back to now is just to finish up. I had where another. I have to go back to the start now. Great. So I suppose as an educator, you just need to be maybe aware of the real world opportunities, and it's, I suppose, our responsibility to make those connections and try to identify maybe misleading information that may be presented in the media. And I suppose just my examples or my own experience of try to take advantage of numeracy opportunities in other subject areas, especially for those learners who don't fully want to engage with the maths textbooks and that sort of thing. Finally, I have some websites here that may be of use to you. Gapminder is a really good one for, it's a great resource for looking at maybe the history and how our world has evolved over time. I'm not sure if any, can you see the website here? I'm not sure if,
Yes.
yeah, great. So I'm not sure if any of you have used this resource before, but
and is it numeracy or is it literacy and numeracy and knowledge?
It's kind of it's about the world basically, and you know, you can look at maybe income versus life expectancy, and you can choose your so there's loads of different topics here that you can use, looking at population, how many rich are the world and how many are poor, how reliable is our world population forecast. There's different maps and trends. Then, so if I just even play the video here, it goes right back to the early 1800s. And you can see here, you can click on some of the balls, and basically how big it is represents the population. So you can see there that China is one of the biggest countries. And then like these tiny ones here, you can see Argentina there, Uruguay. But you can show it, use it like if you were teaching history or geography and looking at maybe what has happened over the course of the last 100 years. And I suppose with whatever, everything that is going on in Israel and Palestine at the moment, it's some really good examples of how, you know, numeracy and graphs can be portrayed, let's say, in the world. Or so basically there's loads of different topics here that you can look at, and there's the ages, the average age that's changing, and there's basically loads of facts. You can use it as a teacher, great resource. World Mapper is another really good one. I don't know, will it open here now for me? Show the differences between countries and their population. Our World in Data is another one where there's loads of great statistics. And then financial justice is great for getting students to think about the injustices of the world and fairness in the world. And you could link in with World Mapper, and they have great cartography where they show that most of our most of the toys are made in, let's say, low economic countries, but then they're shipped to the Western world, the majority of them, you know, and how much they sell for in the Western world then in comparison to what they're actually getting for it when they're making it in the developing world. So I suppose another part of the media is our shopping, which is always a great bugbearer of mine. I love a good bargain, and as we can see here, it's not necessarily half price, and getting your students to actually think about what half price would mean if it was €7. And then there's the graph again. So just concluding comments is that it's very important to recognize that numeracy is more than just basic mathematical procedures. And there's lots of opportunities in newspapers and on social media. And I suppose it is our job to recognize the numeracy opportunities so that we can support our students in developing that critical awareness and that criticality that we wish and we hope for all our students to learn. So I hope you enjoyed today and got a few ideas. I understand, Tony and Imelda, your points are very valid, especially given the sectors that you're working in. So thanks for that feedback.
Kathy, thanks a million. That was really informative and insightful. Even the RT one I was looking at, I'm wondering, was it just someone who did up the graph in the studio and didn't realize it was misleading? It probably wasn't meant to mislead, but it certainly was misleading.
Yeah, and it was just funny, I suppose, the way the news the presenter was so passionate about talking, and I was like, wow.
I don't think they noticed. I'd say they didn't notice the problems. Has anyone got any questions for Kathy there? If you just unmute, if you have any comments or any questions or anything you've spotted or you like to use or works well with your numeracy students. No, so
one
yeah.
second, Fergus.
Tony,
in that site you presented there, Gapminder.
Yes.
Are there any nice little kind of modules that could be run for students using that database?
Yeah, so there's loads of resources on that website. There's even questions for students to work through questions themselves just about the world and statistics, and getting them to, and it gives the misconception. So like one example was which of these countries, and it gives 4 options, deploys most of their army resources to third world countries. And one of the examples was the US, another example was the UK, and then another example was Rwanda. And I actually didn't, I ignorantly chose US, and I thought maybe the next would have been the UK, but it was actually Rwanda was the answer. And then it leads you to what the misconception was, and it told me that 84% of people who answer that question actually get it incorrect, and these are the reasons why. And so there's lots of stuff on there that will help your students to kind of become more critical about information, I suppose, that we're given or that we think we have. So yeah, it's a really good website. I could spend hours talking about the resources there, and there's teacher packs and it's all free and downloadable.
Yeah, thank you.
Any other questions or points for Kathy there?
One of your colleagues from University of Galway, I think his name is Dermot O'Donovan, he's done a beautiful book and it's maps of the world, but he has color coded them to show a whole variety of health outcomes for people. It's all to do with health. It was part of the department. He's in the Department of Health Promotion. It's not online as far as I know, but it's a beautiful book and well worth buying for anyone who has an interest in sort of health and world outcomes and all of that. Dermot O'Donovan, I think is his name.
O'Donovan, okay.
Department of Health Promotion anyway.
Okay, that's great, because I'm obsessed with kind of images and data.
Yes, and I have to assume that his statistics are correct. I have to assume that.
Okay. Thanks for that, Imelda.
Okay.
That's great.
Okay, any other questions or points there for Kathy? No, I think not, Kathy. So I just see in the chat, Kathy, people are saying thanks very much, very interesting in terms of our awareness of how statistics are portrayed in the media, and great examples of misleading information. So very few positive, really positives there, saying thanks. So yeah, it just leaves me to say thanks very much, Kathy, for a really interesting, insightful presentation, and I hope everyone got a few tips for things that even if it doesn't suit their learner, they can just adapt and tweak, and maybe then it'll suit the students they're working with. And just be aware that, yeah, as Kathy pointed out, often the media can be misleading with information. Okay, and thanks everyone for joining in today and attending. All the best. We've got one more webinar tomorrow morning. It's making maths relevant, and it's on from 11 to 12 as well, so you can still book for that if you want. So thanks everyone. Thanks, Kathy.
Brilliant. Thanks, million.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye.